Hi, Jason. Hope you're okay. It's good to see you, even though I can't really see you. Pliny, Tacitus, and Josephus are your latest trump cards in convincing us that the New Testament account is completely historically reliable and that therefore Jesus was magic. Well, two of these guys, Tacitus and Pliny, aren't actually contemporary historians. They're writing in the second century AD, so they're basically already disqualified. But let's look very briefly at them. Pliny doesn't even talk about Jesus. He writes letters to the Emperor Trajan asking him how to deal with these batshit crazy people who call themselves Christians. Well, big whoop. Nobody's denied that Christians existed by the second century AD. You're one of them, Jason, and you're not magic either. So let's move on to Tacitus. By the way, it's Tacitus, or maybe Tacitus according to the more anal classicists, but it's certainly not Tacitus. And Tacitus, again, talks about Christians first and foremost. He talks about how the Emperor Nero, back in the first century, accused the Christians of setting fire to Rome. And he very briefly mentions that the Christians worship a guy called Christ who was crucified under Pontius Pilate. Now, there are two possibilities to explain this. Either he was simply repeating what the Christians themselves said, or he had some independent source of information. Now let's just, for the sake of argument, accept the second explanation. What could that possibly prove? Well, the only thing it could prove is that Jesus was another Messiah claimant who was executed by the Romans during the first century AD. And since you're such a big fan of Josephus, who by the way almost certainly didn't write in 64 AD, he must have written after the destruction of the Second Temple, which was 70 AD, but that's an aside. So you're a big fan of Josephus. Well, Josephus tells us about a multitude of Messiah claimants who lived during the first century and who caused the Roman troops to intervene. So by your Tacitian source, all you could prove is that Jesus is just one of these guys, such as Athronges, who I'm sure you've heard about, who called himself the king of the Jews, and he gathered an army around him. He was defeated militarily by the Romans around 4 BC. Or this unnamed Samaritan prophet who led a great multitude to the holy mountain of Gerizim, promising his followers a mystical revelation in around 36 AD, which is about 3 years after the supposed crucifixion of Jesus. And his followers were so numerous they had to be attacked by the Romans using infantry and cavalry. And then 10 years later, there's another prophet who called himself Theudas, and he led a great part of the people into the desert, according to Josephus, promising his followers that he would miraculously part the river Jordan. And he had to be dealt with the Romans again by cavalry. And another unnamed Jewish prophet from Egypt led an estimated 30,000 men to Jerusalem, telling his followers that he would bring down the walls of Jerusalem so they could just walk into the city. And again, the Roman troops had to be called out to deal with these people, leaving hundreds dead and causing the prophet to flee. And then you got Jesus, who was such a small fry that the Romans didn't even have to uh, use their troops as an intervention. He was simply crucified, and his followers ran away, and then they founded a cult around him. Big whoop. And I could go on about Jewish Messiah claimants from antiquity, people like Menachem ben Yehuda and Bar Kokhba, and whatnot. I'm sorry, Jason, this is not proof for anything. And the fact that Josephus mentions John the Baptist, whoop-de-doo. I mean, it would be a little bit impressive if Josephus already at least had the courtesy of mentioning that John the Baptist was somehow connected to Jesus and baptized him in the River Jordan and recognized him as the Messiah, and that the Holy Spirit descended upon Jesus. But none of the sort can be read in Josephus. The only thing Josephus tells us is that John the Baptist was killed by Herod. Wow, that's very impressive. You are apparently one of those people who would be even impressed by the fact that Spider-Man is set in New York, so therefore Spider-Man must be historically accurate. And Brad Easton Ellis, who mentions all these political leaders and fashion models and movie stars, so therefore Patrick Bateman really committed all his gruesome murders in American Psycho. That's the level at which you're trying to convince us these days. This is not even snake oil salesmanship. This is just insane.